As I indicated earlier on, today's class is going to center on external scan of the business environment, or what has been popularly captioned as external analysis. And by the end of the class, these are the learning objectives that we anticipate to tackle. So we will start by appreciating the explanation for what external analysis entails. When we say external analysis or external scan of the business environment, it simply refers to, and in fact, it can also be called environmental scan or an industry scan. And this involves a thorough examination of the external factors or forces that can have an impact on organizational success. And usually, these factors are typically beyond the organization's control, but they can significantly influence the strategic direction and success of an organization. They are said to be beyond the organization's control because the push and pull forces behind those factors are not within the ambit of the organization. But in one way or the other, organizations can only succeed if they comply and react to them. The conduct of external analysis or external assessments equips an organization with the knowledge that they need in order to navigate the complexities and terrain of the business environment, particularly the external one. And by navigating these complexities, they are able to become familiarized with key opportunities that maintain there, so that they can seize all these opportunities. In the same vein, they are also able to identify possible threats, which when not resolved, it can affect the fortunes of an organization. So it becomes necessary that once these threats are identified, there is a need for the organization to mitigate it. And as we learned last week, organizations are expected to not only center on their opportunities, but when they identify some of these threats, it is incumbent upon them to, in an attempt to mitigate this, convert them to become some opportunities for them. And it is this sort of direction or posturing by an organization that can sustain their level of competitiveness in the business environment. So the nature of external analysis. As I indicated earlier on, external analysis seeks to identify the key factors outside an organization that reflects opportunities or threats that they need to mitigate. So the nature of environmental analysis is essentially to identify these factors and rely on them in taking certain actions or decisions that can either seize the opportunities that exist or mitigate the threats. So it is incumbent upon firms to respond either offensively or defensively by utilizing the information that will be derived from these external factors to inform the strategies that they are going to formulate. Essentially, they are supposed to take advantage of the possible opportunities that will exist out there. And these opportunities could be new or uncharted markets. It could be the need to introduce new products that will follow the current trend in the business market. It could also be an attempt to some of you know I'm recording, and when you join, it will still be. So it's an attempt to take an advantage of the opportunities that exist out there, which may be uncharted terrains, wherein the introduction of new products or new services will seize the opportunity that exists out there. It could also be a particular market that is least patronized, although the demand for goods and services may be skyrocketing. So if these are the information that external analysis is suggesting, then quickly an organization has to take an advantage of that and penetrate into it. But the outcome of the scan will suggest the entry strategy that will help the organization to succeed. So the strategy may require that you either use franchising, you either outsource your services, or you merge with a minor firm that is also ploughing that particular terrain. So the outcome of the external analysis will inform how you take an advantage of the opportunities over there. In the same way, the information that will be generated will also help you to know the varied issues that constitute threats to you achieving competitive advantage. And by so doing, you will be able to identify the right means and strategies to mitigate the impact of that potential stress that exists out there. What then are the reasons why we conduct external audits? Primarily, external audit seeks to inform the strategic decision-making by management in order for them to have, in clear terms, a better understanding and appreciation of what exists in the external environment. And this will mean that that level of clarity of what exists out there will also inform the various actions and decisions they settle on the strategic table. So there are a number of them. This includes an opportunity to identify opportunities that exist in the external environment. So what this means is that by recognizing the positive trends and maybe events that exist in the external environment, organizations can identify new opportunities for growth and development. And these new opportunities for growth and development may entail introducing new products or services that is not already in the market. It could also be relying on a particular technology which is scarce in the business environment that can give you an edge over your rivals. It could even be an entry into a new market which is uncharted. So all these construe opportunities that can be derived when we conduct external analysis. The second one is also to recognize threats.
That I use the orange.
And what we are saying here is that an external audit helps organizations to preempt or anticipate potential threats that an organization is likely to be confronted with. And these threats are said to be pitfalls or milestones that need to be
and I do it like that so I can be pouring more times like the medicine that
minimum film prayer. So by identifying these threats, it becomes clear in the foresight of managers to develop strategies that can avoid or mitigate those threats which exist in the environment. And some of the strategies that can be utilized to avoid these threats include diversifying your product lines such that you are able to get a lot of income from different streams of your products. It could also be, particularly if the market is quite saturated, you can now enter new markets where your goods and services are still needed. Another strategy that can also be utilized to mitigate possible threats is to enhance the competencies and know-how of your workforce so that they will be able to stand toe-to-toe with the competing organizations to deliver to the best satisfaction of the organization. It could also be, threats could also be mitigated by aligning yourself with the current technology which maintain in your community of practice. So beyond the identification of the opportunities and the recognition of threats, the conduct of external analysis also informs strategic plan. So what we are saying here is that all the information as far as the opportunities and threats of an organization is concerned will now be sent onto the strategic decision table. What this means is that the insights or information gained from the external audits will now take a center stage and be treated as a crucial component of the strategic planning process. And this will help the strategic managers to be clear in their mind of the realities that is confronting them in the external world. And based on that, formulate realistic goals and strategies or means that can be utilized to the attainment of those goals. And also inform their search for right resources and allocate them to be properly aligned with the attainment of these long-term goals sets. Okay. Then the fourth purpose why we conduct external audit is that it enhances competitive advantage. In fact, it contributes to the attainment of competitive advantage. And we are saying this because by understanding the external environment, organizations stand an opportunity to position themselves well, more effectively against their competitors. So this will help you to understand what your competitors are doing right and what they are doing wrong as far as their strengths and weaknesses are concerned. And again, it will also furnish you with the possible opportunities which you can capitalize on or take an advantage for. So if you want to outperform your rivals, it becomes relevant that you will not shelve all the information you are deriving from the external audits, but you will rather put them into action and implement them to the latter. So that is what we mean when we say it can enhance the attainment of competitive advantage. And the last one is that it can help an organization to adapt to changes. As we learned earlier on in the previous lectures, the business environment is constantly changing, both internal and external, but the change is markedly changing in the external world, which means that for an organization to thrive and succeed in competing in such a turbulent environment, they must also grow and align their practices with the best things that maintain in the community of practice. Hence, the conduct of external audits, which is going to furnish the organization with what they will now need in order to compete very well, will go a long way to assist the organization in adapting by aligning themselves with the best practices in order to stay agile or responsive to changes in the external environment. Now, what are the key external forces that are usually considered anytime we conduct an external audit? There are 10 of them, but factor analysis suggests that these 10 forces or factors can be clustered into 5 different themes. So the first one include economic forces, and then social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment forces. Thereafter, we have political, governmental, and legal forces. And next is technological forces, and finally, competitive forces. So if you disintegrate these 5 themes, and I have on my screen, you are going to get 10 different forces or factors. For instance, the second one is composed of 4 different forces: the social, the cultural, the demographic, and the natural environment forces. But factor analysis suggests that when you are discussing the ripple effects of these specific forces under the second theme, they go hand in hand, and that is why they've been clustered together. The same can also be said about the third one, including the political, governmental, and legal forces. So in the strict sense of them, in the strict sense of it, there are 10 forces, which can further be clustered into 5 forces. So the crux of today's lectures is going to be centered on how these respective forces and their constituents affects the formulation of strategies and the attainment of an organization's long-term imperatives. And we also understand why we say they are not within the control of an organization. The process of performing external analysis can be likened to the same routes that we went through when we were discussing the process of conducting an internal analysis. It is an information gathering treaty wherein every bit and pieces of information that exists out there, which has a direct or indirect impact on an organizational outcome, is considered. So as much as possible, wealth of information is gathered from all facets of the external environment. And this information may be gathered using properly designed and detailed questionnaires, or conducting focus group discussions or interviews. Following the conduct of these interviews or the gathering of the information, it becomes important for an organization to make meaning out of it. So an analysis will ensue, and the themes or the figures that will be derived from the analysis, we have to make sense out of it. Now, once the analysis is completed and interpretation is also done, and we are able to understand the key forces that are driving an organizational performance, it becomes necessary to itemize or list them down. Now, depending on the sort of analysis that is conducted, you can break down these forces to the ones that construe opportunities and the one that construe a threat that requires some level of mitigation. And that is what will be more important for the strategic managers on the strategic table. Just as we learned during the internal scan that its theoretical underpin is the resource-based view, the theoretical backbone of the external analysis is the industrial organizational view. The theoretical backbone of the conduct of external analysis or external assessments, and as external scan is the industrial organizational view. And the basic tenets of the industrial organizational view is that competitive advantage advocates that the external business environment factors or forces are more important than the internal forces in a firm for gaining any form of sustained competitive advantage. So what they are trying to say over here is that if we compare the internal factors ranging from the functional areas of an organization to the external factors, which I presented a while ago, ranging from economic forces to competitive forces, the industrial organizational view suggests that it is more important for organizations to focus on the external ones, because it is these external ones that will help them achieve a sustained competitive advantage. And they are also concerned about the external ones because the external ones are not within the control of an organization. So you can't decide as and when you may want to respond to them. So at all points in time, you should be familiar with what is happening out there and align your practices to them. In fact, they continue that the formulation of your long-term goals should be determined by these external players. And it is only that pursuit that can help an organization achieve a sustained competitive advantage. So if you compare the argument of the industrial organizational view to that of the resource-based view, they are saying the exact opposite. The resource-based view is rather saying that we should forget about the external forces and pay attention to the internal one, because it is the internal one that we have control over. And once we are able to gather the internal ones that are rare, that are not difficult to imitate and also difficult to substitute, then we will be on the verge of obtaining competitive advantage. On the contrary, the industrial organizational view is rather saying we should rather focus on the external one to the relegation of the internal ones. Because the external ones, even though they are not under our control, that is the more reason why we should be wary and concerned about them. And once we are able to predict those forces that have a likelihood of affecting organizational performance, it will always keep us on our toes and help us be at par with the expectations of the business environment. So that is the industrial organizational view. Now we are going to interrogate the various forces. As I indicated, there are 10 of them. The main forces that are scanned during external audit or external analysis. There are 10 of them. And when you run factor analysis, these 10 can be clustered into 5. But for the benefit of their details, we'll be looking at each of the 10. So the first force to be considered is the economic forces. And these economic forces encompass the overall economic condition and, if you like, trends that can impact an organization's performance or success. And some of these forces include inflation rates in a particular economy, interest rates, availability of credits, whether the economy of a country is growing or booming, or the reverse, level of unemployment in a particular country, the performance of the exchange rates. So all the specific things I have listed on my screen fall within the purview of economic forces, and they are together construed to be the trends or conditions that can, trends and conditions from the economy that can impact an organization's performance. And they are all said to be not in the control of an organization, but the decision to expand or contract your organization, to hire more people, or to embark on retrenchments, the decision to increase your prices or decrease your prices, are all influenced by some of these economic forces. What then is the implication of these economic forces for the formulation of strategy, particularly on the strategic table? How do they inform it? We can think about a decision. So let's take, for instance, when we talk about expanding your business or contracting your business. Generally, when we can generally say that these economic decisions have the likelihood to dictate whether you expand your business or you contract it. In the sense that these economic conditions go a long way to dictate the timing of one's business expansion, or the timing where you may decide to collapse some of your businesses or contract them. For instance, when a particular economy is growing or booming, firms may have the inclination to expand their operations in order to take advantage of this economic growth. In the same vein, or on the contrary, when a particular economy is experiencing recession or difficult times, that wouldn't be a time to expand your business. You may rather decide to cut some costs, and these cost-cutting measures may result in some form of retrenchment or closing down your branches that are not contributing very much to your performance as an organization. So that is how economic forces may lead to expansion or contraction of an organizational operation. It also has implication for the pricing strategy that is assumed by an organization. So let's take, for instance, inflation and interest rates of a particular economy. Usually, when prices of goods and services are going up, or they are coming down, organizations, in order to have adequate capital that can go back into the market to get the right quantity of raw materials and add value to it, and also get the required or desired targeted profits, they may also have to transfer these increments onto their customers, which may mean that when the prices of goods and services, as a result of inflation, when the price of raw materials go up, organizations may decide to transfer these costs to the consumers. So that is how inflation, as far as inflation being an economic force, may affect pricing decisions of an organization. Which means that, left to you as an organization, you may be empathizing with the current economic challenges that individuals may be facing. But if you do not also surcharge these price differences to your customers, you may end up collapsing. The same can be said about, hello, can you hear me? All right, the same can be said about investment decisions of organizations. So typically when a particular economy is flourishing, it can affect the decision of organizations to make capital investments, such as opening new branches, or the decision to upgrade the current technology that they are using to serve their organizational needs. So investment decisions are also contingent on economic forces, such that if an economy is booming and organizations are getting the desired benefit and injection from the economy, then they will also have the financial muscle to be embarking on expansion of their facilities or the upgrading of their facilities. Then the second cluster of forces that we are going to consider include social forces, cultural forces, demographic forces, and the natural environment forces. So what we are saying here is that changes in the social attitude of individuals in the country, changes in their cultural trends, such as the fashion or their style of dressing, the foods that they are now taking delight in consuming. Again, demographically, changes in the age distribution, as well as environmental concerns that are raised in a country, all fall within the purview of these social, cultural, demographic, and natural environment variables. So when changes are occurring across the social attitudes, cultural trends of a community, the demographic characteristics of indigenes in a country, and concerns for the environment is also occurring, they also have implications for strategies that are formulated in order to seize the advantages of these emerging trends. The first implication that we can talk of is when it comes to the products and services that are being offered to the general populace. What we are saying here is that whenever there are changes in consumer tastes and preferences, or when there are emerging cultural trends, this can lead to the development of new products or services which are tailored by the organization to specific demographic group. In fact, in Ghana, a typical example that I can cite is what we can think of in Ghana is when we end up adapting products and service offerings to changes in consumer preferences and cultural trends, as far as the rise in mobile services is concerned. Hitherto, the introduction of MoMo, mobile money banking, the traditional or the general thing to do was to go to bank to either do withdrawal or do some form of depositing. But with the current trend where individuals that are technology savvy and also willing to use their mobile phone to transact the same activity that they may be required to be in their bank premises to do, it has become necessary for almost all business activities to have a mobile money that can be used as an avenue to be paying for services or for goods in exchange for the money. So the introduction of MoMo can be a typical example that Ghana is experiencing, which permeates through the social attitude that we have towards banking, the current cultural trend where it is appreciated and seen as somewhat safe and easy to transact business on your mobile money. And in fact, in terms of demographics, the millennials that are comfortable in using IT or mobile phone also do not have any challenge with utilizing it as an avenue to transact their business. And by so doing, mobile money has come to reduce the stress that individuals hitherto went through in order to just embark on some form of withdrawal at bank premises. So you can just wire money from your accounts onto your MoMo and use it to perform any transaction that you find fits. Now, so what are the implications? So, of course, we are still on the implications. Beside the product and service offerings, which these socio-cultural, demographic, and environmental forces can bring and impact an organization towards the attainment of their performance, we can also think about the issue of corporate social responsibility. So deriving from these social, cultural, and demographic, as well as environmental forces, the theme of corporate social responsibility has taken on a center stage in all business treaties. What we are trying to say over here is that the growing environmental awareness and the need to be socially responsible has now become not only the expectation of the general community, but an action that is wholeheartedly embraced by all corporate bodies. So as we speak, every organization in one way or the other carry out a particular responsibility which they are not expected or legally expected to fulfill, but they see it as their way of giving back to the society where they reside and operate. So those of you that are familiar with, in fact, from the banking industry to the extractive industry, from Newmont to AngloGold, they all have some corporate social activities that they engage in. And this is currently so because of the need for them to be concerned and be aware about their actions that will project their activities as being socially responsible. All right, so let's make progress. Then the less cluster of forces that we are going to consider include the political, governmental, and legal forces. The political, governmental, and legal forces. And what we are saying here is that the states, the local governance system that is also in place, and sometimes activities of foreign governments are all construed to be major players or major regulators, and sometimes even deregulators of activities or operations of an organization. In fact, they constitute the actors that end up either subsidizing operations of an organization in order for them to succeed. They may end up employing individuals into organizations, and they may also end up serving as customers of organizations. So implicitly or explicitly, their activities have an indirect impact on the outcome of an organizational success. The same can also be said about political, governmental, and legal factors, because they represent a major opportunity that organizations can seize in order to take advantage of new trends and new events that are occurring in the business environment. Sometimes too, the arrangement by these governmental and legal forces may come across as a threat that can truncate what hitherto used to be the norm of operations for an organization. So generally speaking, this category, including the political, governmental, and legal forces, are said to include the influence of, they are said to embody influence that originate and call upon for organization to succeed only when there is some level of political stability in a given country. So if there isn't much political stability, then organizations will also find it quite difficult to succeed in their operations. Sometimes too, the policies that are churned out by governments, the way and manner in which they regulate and assign their signature to some legal instruments in order for organizations to comply with, all go a long way to affect the operations of an organization. And some of these policies or regulations may border on taxation. So when there is an increment, when there is a new tax policy that requires organizations to pay something extra, that will mean that in order for firms to attain their projected profits, they may also have to use different avenues in order to attain their set profits. Failure to comply with these tax policies may lead to the organization being surcharged for damages. Besides taxation or tax policies, governments can also introduce trade regulations, as in what sort of items can be traded outside the country and which of them will have to be purchased in bulk by the government before it can go outside. Now, if hitherto organizations were at liberty to independently ply these trade on their own, and there is a new regulation requiring everyone to sell their produce to government for the government to rather take it to the international market, then of course, organizations will now have to comply. In the same vein, still on the trading regulations, it is government of a country that will determine which other countries will have the liberty or the liberation to enter or not to enter. So trade liberalization. And as we are all aware, when the environment for trading is liberalized such that an open market system of that sort can allow other producers from different countries who may have cheap labor and cheap raw material to also compete with organizations in a given country who may not have these same opportunities as far as these cheap labor and cheap resource materials are concerned. Then in no time, they will be out competing the indigenous organizations. So these trade regulations that originate from government policies have a long way to either enhance or cripple organization as far as their performance is concerned. The same can be said about the labor laws that are enacted to regulate the sort of relationship that subsists between employers and their employees, among employees, as well as between employers, employees, and other government agencies that may come in when there is disputes that go beyond the resolve of the two parties. In fact, the activities of organizations may either directly or indirectly impact the environment. And so there are currently in place legal and governmental regulations which every organization is required to comply with. Failure to do will mean you have flouted such regulation and you will have to deal with the consequence. What then are the implications of these forces, including the political, governmental, and legal forces? So the first implication is regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance. It is important for organizations to devise avenues that can always help them to adapt their operations to comply with new laws or new regulations that are being championed by these forces, ranging from the government to the legal forces. And it is important to do so because failure to comply will mean that you will have to pay additional costs for such, for incurring the damages. Beyond regulatory compliance, which is important for strategic management, another implication also borders on political risk management. Political risk management. And this is particularly true for multinational enterprises or organizations that have subsidiaries across different countries. So firms that are operating in multiple countries will need to have strategies that will be able to manage the political risk they may be confronting as they move from one country to the other, and also navigate the different regulatory environments which may be erected by the different countries where these multinational enterprises may be operating. So what may be construed as a legal way of operating in Ghana, as far as our labor law is concerned, may be totally different if you move to a different jurisdiction altogether. So how do you navigate all these things? You will need to be taking political risk management across all your subsidiaries. Then the other implication, as far as strategic management is concerned, borders on advocacy and lobbying. Advocacy and lobbying. So it is important for organizations to be concerned about the outcome of government's regulations and legal instruments which will be erected by some of these government bodies, and advocate or lobby for them to be designed in a way that will go to benefit their operations. So as much as possible, because some of these government policies and regulations are going to indirectly impact their performance, right from the time where the policy is being formulated at the administrative level or maybe at parliament level, their voice have to be heard through some form of lobbying so that their concerns and their plights will be considered during the formulation of some of these policies. And eventually when they are put to use, it will be to serve their interests. So that is why the issue of advocacy and lobbying becomes an important thing when we are doing strategic management. These are some of the specific forces that fall within the purview of the political, governmental, and legal forces. And they range from environmental regulations, which require organizations to comply with. And they also include unionization trends, wherein organizations will be various employee bodies will be empowered to form unions that will champion the interests of employees or the staff. So it permits all these specific forces. Then the next forces to consider include the technological forces. And when we say technological forces, they essentially refer to the impacts that technological advancement or any form of technological innovation is expected to have on an organization. And this includes the pace of technological change, which may take the form of transitioning from a manual way of processing information or gathering information to a paperless way of operating. It could even include the employment of a new technological infrastructure or system that will help you to perform your activities using some form of software or hardware architecture. And specific trends or forces under the technological forces include the advancements of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, cloud computing, mobile devices, analytics. So in this day and age, we have analytics from accounting and finance, marketing analytics, HR analytics to research and information analytics. So when these technological innovations or advancements are now taking a center stage in a community of practice, it becomes necessary for an organization to also understudy it and adopt the one that will help them deliver superior products and services to its customers. And by so doing, the performance of the organization will be up there. What then is the implication of these technological forces? The first implication borders on innovation as well as research and development, which means that in order for an organization to thrive, there must be a deliberate investment in research and development, because it is these researching activities that will expose the organization to emerging trends that can help them stay ahead. So it is important for organizations to invest in research and development so that they can innovate their products and services by embracing the technology that will help them to have such an edge. The second implication for strategic management is that in order for organizations to operate efficiently, to operational efficiency, in order for organizations to operate efficiently, they may have to adopt new technologies. And the essence of adopting some of these new technologies will help to reduce costs that hitherto might have been incurred through the manual way of conducting business. So the efficiency in operational outcomes here will mean that you are going to reduce your cost whilst enhancing your level of productivity by adopting the new technology. Then another implication is for organizations to strategically embrace a digital transformation, wherein organizations are entreated to leverage on technology in order to serve their customers better and also engage them well. And once organizations are able to leverage on the digital transformation to engage their customers and serve them better, they will be in a good position to retain such customers. And as we learned earlier on, if you're able to retain your customers, then you will be on the verge for achieving competitive advantage. Then the last one to consider include the competitive forces. Competitive forces. So when we talk about competitive forces, we are essentially referring to the other rival firms or actors in the business environments which are also in the same line of business. So whoever you are competing with construe your competitive force. And it is important for the conduct of an external analysis to identify these rival organizations and determine their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, so that that information will help an organization to develop a realistic strategy that can match them and outperform them. What then are the implications of the outcome of these competitive forces as a result of the external analysis? The first implication for strategic management is that it will assist an organization in their competitive positioning. So what's competitive positioning here simply means is that by using the information from your rivals as far as their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are concerned, you will be able to develop strategies which will differentiate your organization from that of the competitors. And by so doing, you'll be able to enhance your market positioning. So that is what we mean when we say it can result in competitive positioning. The second implication for strategic management also revolves around the time that will be right for you to either enter or exit the business market. So typically speaking, the outcome of competitive force analysis will help you to discern whether there is keen competition or whether there are certain barriers to entry. So by decoding this information, an organization will be informed on what time it will be more appropriate to enter not only the market that it is currently operating, but new markets as well. And particularly the sort of entry strategy that can help the organization to withstand the rivals that are also operating there. Sometimes too, certain branches or divisions of an organization may not be contributing to organizational success, particularly when so much resources are pumped to those branches or divisions, but the returns that is being received from them is nothing to write home about. If that is the signal you are getting, then the outcome of that competitive force analysis will mean that it may be right for you to exit those markets, which will mean that the branches or divisions that are not excelling in their performance, but rather affecting your fortunes, you may have to truncate them down. Still on the implications of these competitive forces, another implication is that it can help an organization to embark on strategic alliance and maybe some form of mergers or acquisition. So when you conduct the external analysis and you discern the competitive forces in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, the organizations that are in the same line of business with you, but also struggling to take out the resilient ones in the markets, may decide to marshal their forces together by merging. So forming strategic alliance here or pursuing mergers or acquisition will mean that two or more organizations who want to consolidate their operational efficiency and also enjoy competitive advantage may decide to put their forces together and merge. And it is the outcome of this competitive forces analysis which will help you to know which other organization may be equally concerned as you are, for which you may decide to merge with them. So that is the implication for strategic management. It will help you to know which other organization you can align your activities or operations with by merging with them. Okay. Now, the next important thing to consider is the 5 forces model of competition. The 5 forces model of competition. So the 5 forces model of competition was developed by Michael Porter. And he is actually a Harvard scholar who is noted for thinking aloud about how organizations can always outcompete their rivals. Porter's 5 forces model of competitive analysis is a widely used approach for developing strategies in many industries. So we do not use it only in the service industry, but even in the manufacturing and extractive industry, it is utilized. Simply because if you are able to gather relevant information for your community of practice and you follow through these 5 forces, you will be on the right path towards the attainment of competitive advantage. So this 5 forces model that was developed by Porter are said to help businesses understand the factors that influence competition in their environments. And within any given industry, it also helps specific organizations to shape their strategies accordingly so that they will be able to withstand the competition that they are going to face with their rivals. So Porter is simply saying that the nature of any competitiveness in a given industry, whether service sector or the extractive or industrial sector, is composed of 5. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
But I believe you cannot see my screen. Or you can see my screen.
Yes, sir. We can see it.
So let me share it again. All right. So according to Porter, the nature or level of competitiveness in any given market can be viewed as being determined by these 5 forces. And so what are these 5 forces? They include rivalry among competing firms, the sort of rivalry or level of competitiveness among firms. Then it also includes the potential development of substitutes. Thus, the firms have substitute for their products. Then the next other force is bargaining power of consumers. Do consumers have the power to even determine the price at which they buy your goods or your services? Then the next force is potential entry for new competitors. Is the market saturated such that new entrants are prevented from entering, or are there government regulations preventing people to enter into that market? Or the market is a free one such that anyone that has the means and the vision can enter at will. And the last one is the bargaining power of suppliers. Do suppliers have the power to escalate the prices of their raw materials at will, or they have to do that by considering alternative suppliers that may be willing to reduce their prices? So Porter is of the view that whatever competition an organization is facing, in order for them to have an edge over their rivals, they need to consider these forces. So we are going to take these forces in turns and interrogate them. The first force that we are going to consider is rivalry among competing firms. Rivalry among competing firms. And this borders on the intensity of rivalry among firms that may be competing in the same line of business. Now, Porter suggests that rivalry among competing firms tend to increase as the number of competitors increases. So the more we have competitors in a particular line of business, the more the intensity of the competition will also be cutting through. That is what Porter is saying here. And in the same vein, as competitors become more equal in size and capability, then the more the competition also intensifies. He is also suggesting that the intensity of rivalry among competing firms escalates as and when industry products declines. So if industry products are declining, it means that all of us are targeting or producing the same goods into the markets. And because we are all producing the same thing for the same targeted workforce, we will be cutting each other's throats in order to have a larger access to the markets. And he is also indicating that the level of competition and the intensity of rivalry among competing firms also escalates as price cutting becomes common. So price cutting here will mean that if, for instance, Airtel Tigo reduces their price tariff for data and call charges, if they reduces theirs, and Vodafone also reduces theirs, then MTN may have no other option but be inclined to also reduce their charges. So the moment price cutting becomes common in a particular community of practice, then the level of rivalry or intensity of the rivalry among the competing firms will also increase. And Porter is trying to say here that of all the five forces, it is the rivalry among competing firms that tend to be more powerful because organizations tend to be influenced in terms of their decision by what their rivals are doing. And you do not want to do something that will be to the advantage of your rival. So whatever they are doing for them to sustain their customers, you are also inclined to either do same or do something far better in order for you to also consolidate your customers. Then the second force is what Porter characterized as potential entry of new competitors. Are there opportunities for new entrants or new competitors to come into the market and also engage in the same line of production and service delivery? The logic here is that as a particular business environment or market booms and the surviving firms enjoy higher levels of profits, that alone will be a stimulus for other new entrants to also enter the business market in order to get their fair share of the market pie. So whenever a particular market is booming, then definitely it will attract new entrants. Porter is of the view that if the firms in an industry are highly profitable, then the industry becomes a magnet to attract new entrants. And new entrants will be bad news for the incumbent firms because it is the same market pie that they are going to cut into. So if previously you were enjoying a particular percentage of profits for investing into that particular market, then definitely new entrants will mean that your profits is going to go down, particularly if they are able to come out with innovations and strategies that is going to draw away your customers. Which means that unless something is done to stop these new entrants, the competition in the industry will increase and the average industry profitability will also decline. So typical example, in our the cement industry, previously hello, can you hear me? All right.
We can hear you, sir.
Previously, the monopoly was in the possession of Gasem, right? And that arrangement was made because the government had a regulation to allow the licensing for the production of cement to be within the possession of only Ghana Cement, Gasem. But with the deregulation and the opportunity extended to new entrants to enter into it, Dangote is now in the cement industry. In fact, there are a lot of Chinese ones that are currently in the system. And this will not be good news for Gasem. What this will mean is that the prices that Gasem was hitherto charging because they had a monopoly cannot be done the same way. Previously, there weren't any other competitor around. So whether you like Gasem's quality in terms of their cement or not, there was nothing you could do about it. But as we speak, the competing firms in the cement industry are also bringing new quality in the cement. In fact, it's more about within, when you mix it within like 30 minutes, then it starts solidifying. And there are other options where it solidifies much lesser than even 30 minutes. But hitherto, Gasem had the monopoly, so they could do as they wish. So the lessons that we can draw from Porter, as far as potential for new entry, is that the moment a particular industry becomes attractive, as far as the profits that is being enjoyed by incumbent firms is concerned, is that it will serve as a magnet to new entrants. And for the existing ones to protect their level of profitization, there is the need for them to also push for some protectionist regulations. And that is what I meant when I said, unless something is done to stop these new entrants, the competition in the industry will increase and the average industry profit will also decline. So some of the interventions that can be introduced to address these potential new entries that may be a threat to industry profits is erection of barriers to entry, and also utilizing quality, pricing, and marketing strategies to overcome the activities of your rivals. So whenever new firms are able to easily enter a particular industry, the intensity of the competitiveness among the firms increases. And so how can we utilize some of these barriers to offset these risks? So the first one is the barrier to entry. In such an industry, high barriers to entry, such as requiring higher level of capital to enter the business. So with respect to the higher, when we say we are using higher capital requirements before you can enter a line of business, a typical example can be that of the banking industry, wherein the Bank of Ghana has set the minimum capital requirement of the bank to, is it 2 billion now? But previously it was 500,000 cedis. Now, the escalation of the minimum capital requirements will mean that if you are not actually cut out for business, then it will serve as a barrier for you to enter. And it is only the existing banks or the existing firms that are able to meet these capital requirements that can enjoy the profits, the profitability of the industry. Another barrier to entry can also be the having access to distribution channels. So when you truncate the channels through which final products can be distributed to the markets and you make it available to few ones, then it should be quite difficult for individuals that do not have access to these distribution markets to enter into the business market and enjoy the profitability thereafter. In fact, government can also utilize some form of regulations to deter new competitors from entering into the market, particularly if the government finds it as an avenue to protect the existing ones, and it is perceived that the new ones may not add any value to the industry as well as to the fortunes of government. Another strategy that can also be utilized to handle potential entry of new competitors is when firms rely on their brand loyalty. So research suggests that organizations that have strong brand loyalty among their existing customers can make it quite difficult for new entrants or new competitors that are entering into the business market to come and sway away these customers. So if you are dealing with customers that are loyal because you have a brand or a reputation that your customers are satisfied with and also glued to, then definitely the new entrants will not drift them away to go and patronize their services, but they will also be inclined to, organization will be inclined to retain them. And having a loyal and a reputable company will mean that you rather be attracting customers away from brands that are not well established. Again, when potential for new entry new entry is rampant. What existing firms can do is that they can utilize what we call cost advantage, such as lowering their production costs or accessing cheaper raw material that can help them to reduce their cost of their products or services. And this will mean that the new entrants who may not have access to these cheaper raw materials and cheaper labor will not have the means to also charge at a lower rate. And for that matter, you will be inclined to retain your customers. But the danger is when these new entrants are able to utilize the same raw materials as you are having access to, and also able to use same labor to charge lesser prices. If that is the case, then it means that as an organization, you were taking an advantage of the customers, and customers will not treat such an attitude lightly. Another avenue that can also be used to handle potential entry of new entrants is switching costs. So in an industry where the cost of switching from the cost for customers to switch from one organization to the other is high, that alone will be a barrier for new entrants, because once these new entrants come and they are trying to pull customers away from surviving organizations to this new organization, because the cost that will be incurred for the customers to switch from one organization to the other is high, then the customers will be inclined to stay with the original organization. So whenever there is high switching costs for customers, such as retaining the customers, it can make it quite difficult for new entrants to attract such customers from the existing firms. Sometimes too, the existing firms can establish strong bond and relationship with distributors as well as providers of these raw materials, and collude with them not to provide access to some of these distribution channels to the new entrants. So if the new entrants are not able to get access to these distribution channels because of the collusion that is going on, then in no time, they will not be able to thrive. So the existing businesses that want to cut out new competitors may decide to deprive access to distribution channels, particularly if they're able to establish strong relationship with these distributors. Okay, now the next of the 5 forces that we are going to consider is potential substitutes for products. So when there are potential development of substitute of a product, how does it affect the level of competitiveness in a given industry? In many industries, firms are in close competition with producers of substitutes. So if we take our mineral water industry, Belaqua is in close competition with Voltic, as well as which other mineral waters are there? Aquaplast. Edebima. So we have Belapa, we have
Awake.
Baltic.
Awake.
Awake, very good. Awake.
Sorry,
And
Vena.
Vena, very good.
Vena Water.
So
Slim Fit.
Slim Fit. Slim Fit, the islands recently, there were some fake ones being paraded in the market. So you have to be careful. All right, so when organizations' products have close substitutes such that Vena Water will, in the absence of Vena Water, we can have Aquafresh, Slim Fits, Baltic, and the rest. Then that will not utter well for the competition, because you cannot decide to charge exorbitant prices for your products, especially when there are close substitutes existing in the market. For that reason, the presence of substitute products puts a ceiling on the prices that can be charged before consumers will be inclined to switch to the substitute. In fact, for some of us, apart from the fact that we are concerned about the quality of mineral water that we will be drinking, other than that, if I drink Baltic and I drink Belapa, I don't see any significant difference in their taste. Water is water. Except that some of these emerging bottling water companies may not go through the same quality and standard scrutiny before they finally put out their products out there. Other than that, it wouldn't make any economic sense for Baltic to be selling at, so the bigger one is selling about, is it 6 cedis or so? Whilst Vena will be selling the same quantity and quality of water for about less than 5 cedis. So if there are close substitutes there, unless we are able to place value and premium over some of them, it wouldn't make any economic sense to be charging higher prices when there are close substitutes. And that is what we mean by saying that the presence of substitute puts a ceiling on the prices that can be charged before consumers will be willing to switch. And this had huge implications, which indicates that the competitive pressure increases when there is, so the first one is when the price of substitutes also decreases. So Baltic cannot afford to be charging 6 cedis or 7 cedis for their bigger bottle when the competitors such as Belapa are charging below 5 cedis. That is the import of the first point, that when price of substitute decreases, it means maybe government has now cut down the taxes that these firms are expected to pay. And for that matter, the firms can also recalibrate their pricing to reduce the final price to the consumer. So if prices of substitute decreases, consumers may switch from the firm's products to the substitute, leading to a decrease in demand and profitability of the firm. And that is why we are saying that there is always pressure on firms whenever prices of their substitute decreases. So if your substitutes are able to make profits even when they reduce their prices, and you are still charging exorbitant prices for your products, then in no time, your consumers may be switching from your products to the competing organization to patronize the substitute over there. Because at the end of the day, the satisfaction is the same. Then the second issue culminating from the pressure whenever there are potential for substitute products is that consumers So when consumers switching cost decreases, so this borders on consumer switching costs. What we are saying over here is that if consumers switching costs to the substitute products decreases, in other words, the amounts or the cost that they will be incurred when they transition from buying Vortic to, let's say, Verna water, the cost that they are going to incur, if that cost decreases, then they may be more inclined to switch. And this will mean that their loyalty to the previous product, which was Vortic, will also to the previous product will decrease. So Porter is saying that firms in an industry that are facing potential development of substitutes need to be more, they need to monitor these factors. And when I say these factors, I'm referring to prices of substitutes decreasing and consumer switching costs, potential for it to also decrease. And by paying close attention to these factors, there is the need to also develop strategies that can differentiate the products and the services of the firm, and also enhance the level of loyalty that the customers will be having for the firm. Because customers are rational decision makers, and they will be constantly comparing prices and the quality of services they are getting for the prices they are paying. So if they verify that they can equally get similar services at a cheaper price, then their inclination to switch will be high. So as much as possible, when there are potential substitute of products, then we have to be concerned about these forces and inform them in our formulation of strategy. Then the next force to consider, is the bargaining. Okay, is the bargaining power of suppliers. The bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers are said to be the actors that provide raw materials to organizations for them to convert them to the products or the services that are desired by customers. And Porter is saying that bargaining power of suppliers is increased when there are fewer suppliers. So if you are having potentially only one supplier of a raw material, then they can decide to increase their price at will. Sometimes their increments may not be influenced by the interest rates or the devaluation of a country's currency or the increments in carriage costs or whatever, what have you. But it may be based on their own set target for profits. But when you have fewer suppliers, then the moment you increase, a particular supplier increases his or her prices for the raw materials, it will become easier for the firms to switch to other suppliers that can offer it at a relatively reasonable price. So we are saying that the bargaining power of suppliers increases when there are fewer suppliers. In the same vein, when the substitutes that are available in the industry is few, it also increases the bargaining power of the supplier. So such that if the production of a particular product, relies on only a material peculiar to fewer suppliers, then definitely they will have to kowtow to the direction of these suppliers, which gives the supplier much power. In a similar vein, the bargaining power of suppliers also increases when the switching cost of the raw material is also high, such that if you are now not going to use material A, but you are going to use a different material to achieve the same outcome, you may have to incur an additional cost. If that is the case, then the suppliers have a lot of power to decide on who they sell to, how much they even charge for their materials. So in a nutshell, what Porter is saying is that when there are few suppliers in a market, they have more bargaining power since they can dictate the terms to the buyers, and this will lead to higher prices and sometimes lower quality of the goods. And the reverse is true. With respect to substitutes, Porter is saying that if there are few or no substitute for a supplier's products, then buyers have limited options to pick from. And this gives the supplier more leverage in negotiation, wherein they can decide who they sell it to, how much they charge for their materials, and so on and so forth. With respect to the switching costs, Porter is saying that when the cost of switching suppliers from one supplier to the other, or from one raw material to the other is high, then buyers are less likely to switch. And buyers here refer to the firms that are going to procure these raw materials to add value to. And this gives the suppliers more power to dictate. What this means is that if we want to break the power of the suppliers, then it will mean that government must encourage and empower a lot of people to go into the supplying business. In fact, government may have to take a center stage over there so that once the raw materials are procured at a reasonable price, then firms will also be inclined to charge at a reasonable price. But until then, much of the power will be in the hands of the supplier, and that's those that are able to have the right negotiation skills to succeed will have the power to compete very well in the business environments. And that is why we say that firms must carefully manage their relationship with their suppliers and explore alternative source options in order to mitigate the impacts of the supplier's power and also increase their bargaining power. So if you have a lot of options to be supplied your raw materials, then when you are dealing with supplier A, you can negotiate properly. Because if things do not go according to your terms, especially if you are not able to strike a middle ground, if you are unable to bargain successfully, then you will fall on your alternatives. Then the bargaining power of consumers. Essentially, it refers to the power that the individuals that patronize an organization's goods and services have. Now, the bargaining power of consumers is also determined by a number of factors. And Michael Porter is of the view that when customers are concentrated or large in numbers, or sometimes when they buy in bulk or they buy in volume, then their bargaining power presents a major force that will affect the intensity of competition in an industry. Typically, when you buy in bulk, you are able to offset some of the prices, and the seller can afford to even give you price concessions, as opposed to when you are buying in silos or you are buying in units. Now, the bargaining power of consumers or buyers can be influenced by a number of things, including the concentration or the buying volume, which is akin to what I just said. So when customers are concentrated or buying in volumes, they are able to negotiate for price reductions or even better terms from the supplier, as opposed to when you are buying in units. Another factor that also affects the bargaining power of consumer also revolves around product standardization, or when a particular product is unique or different in the market. What Porter is trying to say here is that in markets where products are standard or undifferentiated, customers have more power and they are able to easily switch between suppliers without significant consequences, because the services or the products that they are going to patronize is not novel. It is not so different. Okay, so this puts pressure on the supplier. In fact, the suppliers to compete among themselves in terms of providing reasonable prices and reasonable quality. So if customers or buyers are patronizing products that are standardized, usually the ones that are mass produced, then it grants them a lot of power, because if they do not buy from supplier A, they can go to supplier B and get the same standard product. However, if the product is differentiated, it has some level of uniqueness, which is different from the one that maintained in the market, then the customer will not have that power. And for that matter, they will be inclined to come to whoever will be willing to supply that differentiated product. Another factor that also determines the bargaining power of customers is information. The ease and availability of information. Whenever there is ease in terms of access to information about products and their prices and their quality, it ends up empowering buyers or customers to compare their options and make informed choices. So that is why it is always good to not buy from the first vendor you visit. Sometimes it is prudent to move from one vendor to the other, and then you will compare the prices. So if after moving across maybe 2 or 3 vendors, there is a wide gap in their pricing for the same quality of goods or services, then the power to purchase is transferred onto the buyer or the consumer, so that they will be inclined to purchase the one that is more reasonable or cheaper. But in situations where the availability of information is scarce, such that you do not know how much others are selling the same product for, then the power moves away from the consumer or the buyer to whoever will be selling, and they will be inclined to sell it at whatever they will. Then another factor that may also influence the power of consumers or the buyer borders on price sensitivity or price volatility. So what this means is that when customers or buyers are highly price sensitive, they are more likely to switch to cheaper alternatives, and this gives them more bargaining power. Let's assume there is an anticipation that tomorrow fuel products, so prices of petrol, diesel, and kerosene are going to go up. The chances that consumers or vehicle users will react to it and quickly go and fill their tank now is high. This is so because they are being sensitive in order to avoid the additional costs that may come up when fuel pumps are prices of fuel pumps are increased tomorrow. And the reverse is true. When the anticipation is that tomorrow prices of petroleum products are going to reduce, then those that are even having red lights, like almost an empty tank, will wait now and rather fill their tank tomorrow is high. Okay, so that is it. All there is when we talk about the bargaining power of consumers. Now, where are the sources that we can gather and analyze the external environment in order to identify the opportunities and threats which require some level of mitigation? These sources may be published or unpublished, and the unpublished ones may be the information that may be gathered from customers who answer our questionnaires or our surveys. It could also be gathered from an instituted marketing research done by a specific organization. So if we set out to gather a marketing research information for our firm in order to serve our customers better, that would be a sort of an unpublished information that can help us to help inform our external analysis. Again, speeches and commentaries from other stakeholders or shareholders of an organization can also be construed as an unpublished source of information. Communique from the television, radio, and any other avenue may fall within the purview of unpublished information. Whereas the published ones could be discerned from governmental documents and journals, articles that are published in the dailies, newspapers, periodicals, and manuals of organizations. They all serve as an avenue for us to get information about what is happening in the external environment. Now, when you are assessing this information, what are the specific strategies that can be utilized to conduct the external analysis? Just as we did for the internal analysis by conducting internal factor evaluation matrix, we can equally utilize that approach to conduct external factor evaluation matrix. But the constituents of this evaluation will be the 10 forces that are said to be the factors that have the likelihood to affect an organization's performance, even though they may not fall under the control of the organization. So a typical external factor evaluation matrix will itemize these 10 external forces and detail them out. So for instance, when you take the economic forces, you can desegregate it depending on the one that has a direct effect on your organizational success, which could be the level of employment in a particular country, inflation rates, exchange rates, the amount of taxes that are being championed by the government and all that. You will have to itemize them for each of these forces. Now, once you itemize or you list them, the next is to assign weights to them. So just as we did for the internal factor evaluation matrix, the assignment of weights will also range from 0 to 1, wherein 0 will designate lower level of importance attached to that particular factor, whilst 1 will signal higher level of importance as far as the attainment of organizational success is concerned. Then each of these forces are also expected to be rated, ranging from a scale of 1 to 4. Following the multiplication of each weight and each rate, then you get what we call the weight gained score. The weight gain score. And this weight gain score will designate aspects of the forces that construe an organization's opportunity and the ones that construe an organization's strength. Just as we did for the internal factor evaluation matrix, the threshold for determining whether a particular factor is a strength or a weakness is 2.5. So if any of the weighted score is lower than 2.5, then it means there's a problem. But if it is higher than that, then at least there are some opportunities and threats that can be remedied or mitigated. Now, for the specific factors, the threshold to discern whether a particular factor constitutes an opportunity or a strength is 0.2. 0.2. So that if you peruse the listed factors after multiplying them, and some of them are having scores less than 0.2, then it suffices to conclude that those factors constitute a threat which must be worked upon. However, if a particular factor is getting a weighted score higher than 0.25, then it constitutes an opportunity that must be leveraged in order to improve the fortunes of the organization. So perusing the one on our score, the output was generated after a thorough analysis. So just as we do in data analysis, when you get information from your SPSS, it is incumbent upon you, the human, to make meaning out of it. Now, if we peruse them, you realize even under the opportunities and the threats, some of them are having thresholds higher than 0.25, which means we are supposed to rearrange them and categorize them as to which ones are truly an opportunity for the organization to capitalize on, and which ones are truly the threats which we must mitigate. So if you take the number 1, for instance, which is a factor on two new neighborhoods developing within 3 miles, that is actually a threat, because if you look at the weighted score, it is less than 0.25. So it is a threat which we must mitigate, which means some of our neighbors are getting closer to us, and in no time, our customers will drift to that particular cinema complex to watch their movies instead of coming to whatever we are doing. So we have to be thinking about something we can do to sustain our customers and not lose them to these two new neighbors. Now, if you look at the 7 points here, the weighted score is 0.06, which is less than 0.2. So it actually controls a threat, which means unemployment rates in the county declined by 3.1. So if unemployment rate is declining, it means that a lot of your rivals are also hiring the same workforce that you are cut out for. And it is actually a threat. In no time, you may end up losing your workers with distinctive capabilities to your rivals. So that particular score, which is 0.06, being less than 0.25, is a threat that you have to work on, which means if currently your workers are complaining about something and you are not minding them, then you have to do something about it. Now, when you come down here, the 8th point, which is here, the weighted score is 0.48, which is higher than 0.25. Now, let's interrogate it. Trend towards healthy eating, eroding concession sales. Trend towards healthy eating is eroding concession sales. When we say concession sales, it means that you are selling something to your customers, not at the original price, but at a reduced price. As a Ghana, when you go to market and you are told that the price of the item is 100 cedis, typical Ghanaian will ask for a price reduction. So he will ask, is that the last price? And I said, what is the last price? Now, if you move from the original price to a much lesser price, which the seller believes it will be more conducive to make some profit, and the buyer also believes it is also reasonable, then we construe that one as a concession sale. So when we say trend towards healthy eating is eroding concession sales, the implication is that because people are now inclined to eat much healthy now, they are not concerned about asking for price reductions because they are willing to pay for higher price in order for them to get healthy food. So that is actually no longer a threat to the organizational practice, right?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, sir. This is Francis.
Okay.
Frida is standing by, waiting for you to let her in.
Well, all those that if she's one of the ones that was disturbing, then I have taken all of them out. They cannot join again because you are supposed to only speak to me when you are answering a question or you are asking a question for clarification. So all these interjections, please avoid it. All right.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So because trends towards healthy eating is no longer perceived as a threat, looking at the weighted score over here, it is now supposed to be leveraged by organizations to also invest in healthy food for the individuals that patronize their cinema. So when you are serving them some beverages, it can be organic ones. And that is how we interpret and make meaning from an external factor evaluation matrix. The second avenue that can also be used in conducting external assessments beyond external factor evaluating matrix is competitive profile matrix. Competitive profile matrix. So competitive profile matrix is just like external factor evaluation matrix, except that here the firm will be comparing their strengths and weaknesses to that of a competitor. The firm will be comparing their strengths and weaknesses on the 10 external forces to that of a competitor. If there are multiple competitors, then you will do so. And by doing that, wherever you are excelling in comparison to your rivals, it becomes necessary for you to sustain them. But in avenues where you are struggling and lagging behind compared to your rivals, you quickly seize the opportunity to turn those weaknesses into your strengths. So the items or the factors that would be listed for the organization to identify their strengths and weaknesses in comparison to their rivals is what we call their critical success factors. And they are essentially the 10 external forces we perused earlier on. But depending on the line of duty of an organization and the business that they are into, some of these forces may be prioritized, whilst others may be relegated to the background. So that is competitive profile matrix. And this is an illustration of the competitive profile matrix. This is also your reading assignments. What I mean by reading